They say the eyes are windows to the inside of your brain. So what if I told you there was a way to show exactly what the eye sees without having to go through all the usual messy trouble of cutting the dang thing open and sticking a camera in there? The eye reflection shot. I've been noticing these shots all over the place and thinking about all the different things this powerhouse of subjectivity can be used to convey. Fear, desire, losing yourself, this. And I've come to the realization that what first looks to be a simple gimmick is actually one of the most versatile storytelling tools out there. Unfortunately, it's almost completely impossible to pull off in the real world. In animation though, much like Paul McCartney with a synthesizer, the only limit is your imagination. So let's see what can be done with it. Our first and most basic function is to serve the plot or flow of a scene by providing a smooth transition from one shot to the next, like from the music video for Dead Mam's Chest by Hosho Marine. When you have two characters looking at each other and want to have a slick and stylish transition between the two, the shot reverse shot with eye reflection transition is a no-brainer. This is probably the most common use of the shot, but even for this use case, it's not always so simple. Take this hilarious example from Death Note, which isn't a fully seamless transition, but more of a match cut. L isn't just looking at Light, but scrutinizing him. The reflection of Light, the image of him that's always gradually forming in L's mind, wells up in the empty blackness of his eyes, which are uniquely suited to reflect whoever's across from him, both figuratively and literally. Or take this mind-bending cut from Jujutsu Kaisen, where first this dude's glasses act as a proxy for his eyes and we transition into the reverse shot of Geto in the same way as that first example. Then we proceed straight into Geto's eyes where the good boy Tasuke is waiting for us. The double layer is intentionally disorienting as we're lured into this illusion along with the character. Meanwhile, X-Arm uses a characteristically rudimentary and ugly version of the shot to obscure the identity of a mysterious character. Don't worry, I'm just as shocked as you that I just used X-Arm as an example. Reflections can be used to obscure, but also to reveal. But before we get too far into it, I need to organize my thoughts a bit. I gathered 24 screenshots of examples of this technique in action. And by the way, thank you so much to everyone who sent me an example to look at, even the ones that I didn't end up using. And I dumped all those screenshots into a mood board to see what similarities would emerge using this video's sponsor, Milanote. Milanote is a tool for organizing your creative projects and ideas into visual boards. They have templates for basically any type of project you could think of, whether it's something like a shot list for a short film or a flowchart for software development. In this case though, I have once again gathered a collection of random screenshots that need to be grouped in an intuitive visual way, so the mood board template is perfect for that. With Milanote's intuitive interface, I could just drag and drop or copy and paste my examples from anywhere and immediately start finding ways to categorize things and even start drawing directly on my board as soon as ideas started coming to me. It really lets me work at exactly the extremely sporadic speed of my own brain, and I know that kind of sounds like generic marketing speak, but that's genuinely the best way I can think of to describe it. Then, all that could be nested directly within my much less chaotic project planning board for this video, where I keep my outline, title, and thumbnail ideas, sources, and to-do list using their agile task board template, which keeps everything looking really clean and prevents my baby brain from getting overwhelmed. Last time I worked with Milanote, I got a bunch of comments from people saying, "Hot dang, a YouTube sponsor that's actually useful and I would like to use? What a concept." So I'm psyched out of my mind to get to work with them again. Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so if you think you could use a tool like this, sign up for a free Milanote account by going to milanote.com/swampjohn or clicking the link in the description. Thanks again to Milanote for sponsoring this video. Now back to it. Now, you may have noticed that at the start of this video, I said this shot is only possible in animation, and then my mood board contains several live-action examples. There are two reasons for that. First, that I'm a conniving son of a who loves to lie just for the thrill of it, and second, each of those examples has some quirk or difference that proves the rule. We'll come back to it in a little bit, such as in the James Bond film Goldfinger, where the James Bond, mid-smooch, peeps the reflection of an attacker in the eye of the smoochee, then tosses the attacker in a bathtub, gives him an excruciating death by way of conveniently poorly insulated fan, gives a cheeky little smile like the little stinker he is, and mumbles the cheesiest one-liner of all time. Shocking. Then repeats it 2 seconds later, just in case either the audience or the traumatized woman on the floor didn't hear it the first time. Positively shocking. In Dandadan, this isn't even a literal reflection at all, but a window into a memory as Momo recalls a piece of advice from her grandma. But by far the biggest function for a reflection in someone's eye is to communicate something subjective about the character. After all, you know what they say, eyes are the trapdoors that lead to a woman's heart. It could be desire, romantic or otherwise, like in K-pop Demon Hunters when Rumi sees Jinu for the first time, or when Yuri of On Ice fame asks Victor to be his coach. In Look Back, all Fujino sees in the world, in her future, is manga, and that's reflected in her eyes as she gazes at the page. But once she realizes that her absent classmate's work is actually really good and her sense of superiority is threatened, harsh reality shatters her fragile ego. Suddenly, the world seems a whole lot bigger than it did a second ago, and the glistening reflections have vanished from her eyes. The future that seemed to be her right to inherit is gone in an instant. How about a loss of innocence? Well, the summer Hikaru died portrays that with the reflection of a sparkler fizzling out in a young Hikaru's eyes as he learns about his family's generational curse. That brings us to the lack of a soul and back to live action. It's debatable whether this counts, but in Midnight Mass, Father Paul is shown to be an inhuman monster by a blank reflection in his eyes, like those of a woodland beast of some sort, which gives the impression that there's nothing human behind them. Oh, it's also in Sinners. I guess it's kind of becoming a general vampire thing. That's of course borrowing a technique from Blade Runner, a film obsessed with eyes.
I just do eyes.
And which explicitly deals with the idea of looking into or monitoring with a sci-fi device someone's eyeballs to see if they're human or not, and whether it's truly even possible to clearly make that distinction. This effect was created by positioning a two-way mirror at a 45-degree angle in front of the camera, then shining a bright focused light through that two-way mirror such that to the actor, the light appears to be directly in front of the camera lens, like a teleprompter. The light reflects directly into the actor's eyes, bounces off their corneas, and back into the lens, creating this artificial-looking glow. But does this really count as a reflection? It's just light, no discernible image. For that, we need to turn away from practical effects and toward visual effects. The eye motif is established in the second shot of the film with this extreme close-up of an eye with the reflection of the cityscape composited on top. It's unmistakably human, but it's not entirely clear to whom this eye belongs. It could be the investigator who we see looking out a window a few seconds later, but it could just as easily be the android Roy Batty as he arrives on Earth. This is one of only 2 live-action examples of this shot that I've been able to find where it's used in quite the same way that it so often shows up in animation, and anime in particular. We've already seen the other, it's the Goldfinger scene. Now seems like a good time to get back to those limitations and exceptions in live action. For anyone unfamiliar, the classic eyeball is famously spherical, and spherical things reflect everything around them in every direction, which means any individual object gets compressed down into a tiny space. They're also not perfectly reflective, which means that if you wanted to get a clearly visible reflection in someone's eye, whatever you're reflecting would need to be not only huge and or close enough to practically fill the person's entire field of view, but also way brighter than anything else in the scene. Not to mention, there is no angle at which your camera won't also be reflected, so you also need to either hide it really well or remove it in post somehow. So there are basically 3 ways to achieve the shot in live action. 1. Overlaying or compositing a second exposure over the first one to create the illusion of a reflection like these 2 examples. In the case of Goldfinger, they used a technique called front projection, which is actually quite similar to the two-way mirror setup for Blade Runner's replicant eyes, except it's a projector instead of just light, and it creates an image that would be completely impossible in real life. Because the compositing approach creates these impossible images, and disbelief can only be suspended so far, it seems the shot must either be so abstract and vibes-based that it nearly doesn't feel literal at all, as is the case with Blade Runner, or cartoonish to the point of absurdity, as in the case of Goldfinger. 2. It's not actually an eye, but a stand-in for an eye, like sunglasses or the lens of an AI computer. Or 3. It's not an object or person being reflected, but a large light source, like in Game of Thrones when we see the wildfire explosion under King's Landing in the eyes of Lancel Lannister, who is unable to prevent it, or the climax of The Force Awakens when the red and blue lightsabers are reflected in Rey's and Kylo Ren's eyes. I don't think either of these are entirely practical effects, but in both cases there is clearly a real light source in front of the actors' faces. This is clearly still symbolic, but it's debatable whether it's really an eye reflection shot per se, or just effectively the same thing you get when an influencer stands in front of a ring light and you see a big white circle in their eyes. So while it may not be completely impossible to pull off, with visual effects all is possible, every live-action example comes with at least one caveat, which reinforces the rule. An eye reflection can make a character seem less human, but it can also do the exact opposite. In The Last Unicorn, another movie that deals directly with eyes as a signifier of humanity, the clumsy wizard Schmendrick turns the last unicorn into a human to hide her from the Red Bull and gives her the name Amalthea. But the longer Amalthea stays in human form, the more human she becomes, and when she sings "Now That I'm a Woman," a reflection of her unicorn form slowly fades from her eyes as she gradually loses her true self. In 2001: A Space Odyssey, Dave Bowman is reflected in Hal's camera lens in a shot that's simultaneously a close-up of the lens itself and a point-of-view shot from Hal's perspective. The assumption is that Hal, being a computer, isn't fully sentient or alive, but this shot takes the lens and turns it into an eye and puts us into its perspective, in doing so lending sentience to the machine. And just as a reflection can tell us something about the eye haver, it can also tell us something about the reflectee, like in Dungeon Meshi when Marcel wants to use excruciatingly painful magic to mend Senshi's wounds, and the two reflect in each other's eyes. Senshi, pitiful and distorted so his gumball eyes appear pointed up and in different directions, and Marcel becomes a freakish monster in the distortion caused by Senshi's quivering eyes. Or even something about the world itself, like in this cut from the opening of Lazarus, which I would be surprised if it wasn't directly inspired by that one from Blade Runner. It's equally abstract, but seems to show an eye glazed over, staring at an open window, which could suggest a world emptied out and numbed by a miracle drug that removed all pain. And it can also do whatever the hell is happening at the end of this Goblin Slayer episode, where we linger on this reflection in the eye of a bird for almost an entire minute and a half. I don't know what this signifies because I absolutely refuse to watch an entire episode of Goblin Slayer. If you know, I guess let me know in the comments. Or, in case you forgot, this. This is still anime we're talking about here. Thanks so much for watching, and if you want to help with algorithm stuff, feel free to leave a comment and or share the video. And a big thank you to all my supporters on Patreon who are in line to become the next pope, you know, whenever that happens. Smackintosh, Scorpiante, Katie L, Serial Isle, Leia Pico, Newtaf, Patrick Davison, Arborix, Jun, Dr. Yola McSwag, Grab G, Joe, Fogunlugget, Annie, Sammy Z, Nozami Corgi, Machu Stepek, Juicebox, Bloodsbane, and Orwing, as well as all the other names you're seeing on the screen right now.